o'clock. So if you have questions for him, you may want to note that. I would just start off, Senator Archie, would you like to open up with opening comments?
I would, thank you. I'm holding this for Access TV. There is no PA, so I'll speak loud. If you can't hear, hold up your hand, please. Well, Mike, thank you very much for sponsoring. That's very important that we have these legislative issues meetings, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting us today, and I'm glad that all of us could come here that represent the citizens of Saline County. I also have part of Dickinson County that I serve. I have picked up an extra committee this year, so I'm on ethics and elections, and you've probably heard some of the legislation that we're looking at. We're looking at changing the election dates from the spring to the fall, and part of that is based on the extremely low voter turnout, and we've been soliciting opinions on that. And probably the biggest one that people have not liked is the partisanship. So in our committee meeting this last Thursday, I made a motion to amend that bill that it would be non-partisan elections. However, the change of date is still in flux. We're looking at some that are on odd years and some of that on even years, and then there's some other things on that. So that's probably the biggest thing that's happening in terms of elections. In terms of ethics, we've had Carol Williams from our Ethics Commission come over and testify that we have needed to change some of our rules, which have been in force since 1974. So that's almost 40 years. And so we've taken her suggestions and looked at changing the amount of donations that we can take as representatives and senators, and also the statewide elections. Those are looking at being changed. The other thing that we've looked at is how our local governments and some of those groups belong to lobbyist groups. And we have changed some of that. We're making the lobbyists now responsible for reporting those donations, because as you know, if you put in a certain amount of dollars, you've got to report that you have paid to have conversations pro or against, for a legislative issue or against a legislative issue. So that's also looking at. The other committee I'm on is natural resources, and of course we've been looking at easements in perpetuity, and we're looking at, is that a good thing for Kansas? So we've been working with different groups talking about that across the state. The biggest one is probably about the dams that we build and the tax abatements that we offer the landowners. So there's still some question on that. We're still getting some information, but that will probably be kicked out this next week. You've probably heard some discussion on the Lesher Prairie chicken. We're still getting some, I guess, feedback on that. Yes, everybody's kind of laughing. It's interesting. It's a 5-state consortium that's looking at the Lesher Prairie chicken covers a large area. However, we look at that as a game bird, and they're looking at it as an endangered species. So we have some difference in just discussing where we are on this. I'm also on the Education Committee. Diana is also on that in the House. We've had some very excellent joint meetings looking at different methods to help our students learn better. The last program we just had was a man from Arizona with a charter school called Carpe Diem. And he's been doing this for a number of years. In fact, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had heard about him through some other people, and actually gave him $25,000 in 2010 to produce a video to show exactly what was happening at the school. And I guess the bottom line there is, with their teaching methods using today's technology, they're getting 92% of their students to reach proficient or above in reading, math, and science. And with that percentage, it really caught my attention. And part of those questions that happened at that point were, well, you're cherry-picking students, and you're just getting the best of the best. And he assured us that that was not the case. He was looking at the at-risk students, and the way we pick at-risk students is those that receive free or reduced lunch programs. And at the schools that he's teaching at, somewhere between 55 and 88% of those students are at-risk students. So he is really using all the populations that come to school. The other activity I'm on, which is probably near and dear to all your hearts, is the budget. And that is something that we've changed in the last 2 years. We've gone to a tier 2-year budget, which I'm very thankful for. it has allowed us to look at some policy questions across the board with every area of government spending to really, if you want to call it, get in the weeds and make some, I think, some significant changes in the ability for them to have more freedom to hire and fire people and give raises and classified and unclassified. So we've really uncovered a lot of things that are important, I think, to the stakeholders, you as taxpayers, to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck. So I'm very thankful for a 2-year budget, and I'm looking forward to some of the policy changes that we'll have this year. So thank you very much for coming, and thanks to AT&T and the Chamber this morning.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks to all of you for being here and to our sponsors. Great to get to share a few minutes with you on Saturday morning and hear some of your thoughts about what's going on in Topeka or your issues. Thanks for the emails that I have received to help me know what is going on and how some bills affect your world. I have learned a great deal from that, this session as well as every session. My committees include the Ag and Natural Resources Committee, the Budget Committee that's related to that, Pensions, and the Military Committee. But as I think of some of the main things just to highlight, the first one that I'll mention is a real softball, and that is the State House. It is actually a real pleasure to go to work in the morning in such a building. And I thank everyone for their role in that. It was not cheap. Although I see the history as I come in through the new visitor center now and think of what my great-great-grandparents' generation did when they came in the mid-1800s and the 1880s, and what a sacrifice it was to make it happen then, and the vision that they had that we can still enjoy today. And I mention that largely to encourage you as you head down I-70 to take an extra 30 minutes on one of those trips if you haven't lately, and just wander in. If you've got a little more time than that, I think you'll enjoy it. But our first 2 years in the legislature, it wasn't quite as enjoyable. But it really is a pleasure, and the richness of that is great to see, both the lessons of history and what we get to enjoy today. Second to that, in terms of building for the future in Ag and Natural Resources, we've had some great presentations from K-State and technology, the things we're able to do with unmanned aerial vehicles right here, and the opportunities that opens up for the world, but definitely for our local economy, I think are huge. Long term, the larger issue for our state is water. And what do we do? And the governor has asked to be engaged in that. And on that, I'll just highlight one thing. It's way out there, and that's the aqueduct. And many of you have heard about the aqueduct. That is a big project that would divert water from the Missouri River and through an aqueduct or possibly a pipeline, take it through the Flint Hills down to the south of us, where it could dump water along the way into Marion, Canopolis, and Cedar Bluff lakes. Have a pretty large storage pool both on the eastern and somewhere west. They're looking at around Utica with the initial proposal. I think it was 1982 that they did the first one, and Senator Arpey probably knows more about it than I do. Then it cost $4.4 billion. The cost will be huge. The challenges are huge, and I'm not saying that this is the solution. This faces political challenges, which may be insurmountable, outside of our state as well as inside our state. It faces physics challenges, which will be pretty darn challenging, not insurmountable, but because of this third challenge, which is economics, the economics may not allow us to spend enough to meet the physical challenge. What I like about the idea, I hope that it stimulates the type of thinking about big and different ideas to dream a little. Some of them are going to get thrown away in the process, but come up with the crazy ideas, the what ifs, the what coulds, because these are the types of things that really could make a huge difference. And again, as the State House is making a huge difference several generations later, this is the type of thing that will make a huge difference several generations later. And they're hard to get our arms around, but I encourage us to do it. Whether it's the issue of water or other things that we deal with, I like trying to stimulate some of those ideas. We can't do them all, but we need to pick on those things that will have the greatest impact for our state and our future residents. So that part of it is at least intriguing, although as soon as I saw the study, boy, it looked like pie in the sky. Is it feasible? It will be interesting how the updated study comes back to us. I don't know if we'll be lucky enough to get that by the end of this session, but I know it's something that we'll be working through in the governor's 50-year vision for the water plan. The other topic for me is pensions, and we actually have done a lot. And to your risk, I don't have my former colleague Charlie Roth sitting next to me to squeeze my arm when I had spoken long enough, as he sat on the committee with me in Topeka also. But the other colleagues may find the appropriate thing to pull away from me if I go too long. This year, the first part of the session, we have focused on what the numbers need to be in the new cash balance plan. In 2012, we passed the plan to make sure that the flows into the system exceeded the liabilities of the system. They didn't happen to at that time. We also have a huge help since then. The return in the portfolio last year was 17.7%. It's a huge help. Over the years between last year and the last 2 years, it's close to $1 billion. Those get averaged in over 5 years, so you won't see them for a while. But it really is a huge help that aids the plan that was in place. Nonetheless, as we came up with a cash balance plan, it was fairly late in that session, and the assumptions were set in conference committee by compromise, which is a good way to achieve things. Nonetheless, you need to vet those numbers. You need to make sure that what we might agree on actually works. And there were a couple of problems. The biggest problem of which is the amount paid to employees was at the discretion of the board above a given return. The Capers Board of Trustees does a great job of managing the portfolio. They would be in a great position to determine what would be appropriate to pay. However, could there be some political influence exerted on that decision? Might they start to become lobbied as to what is needed? And they looked at that and said, we want to manage the portfolio. We want you to tell us what goes in and what comes out. That's a legislative thing. So we tried to figure out how we take that discretion away and put it in a formula. In short, we looked at Nebraska and Kentucky. Kentucky had a better way, in our opinion, of sharing the upside, and we have basically followed that plan. We ran those numbers. We passed a bill yesterday which made those changes, and there's a number. It lowers the guarantee amount for future employees from 5.25 to 4, so it lowers the risk to the state. But it inserts a formula dividend that starts right away rather than after we're 80% funded, which the actuary projects would pay at 6.5% total on average. So it is actually a higher payout with a lower risk. The cost to the system over the entire time frame is virtually the same. The fiscal notes were big, but they don't play out until after 2030, so I pretty well ignore them. If you read it, it's $3 billion to the state school group and $1 billion to the local group, but again, we're paying the same to more initially with a lower risk. Again, we only pay it if the return is there in the portfolio. If it's not there, it's not paid. I think that is as close to a win-win as we could come up with for both the employer and employee in that relationship. There are a few other things that are there, but that was the primary driver to make sure that the plan was viable and could work on the assumptions that were set and wouldn't bump its head into some issues. So that is now through the House. It will go to the Senate, and we'll see where it goes from there. The second part of the session we will be focusing on working after retirement, returning to work, sometimes referred to as double dipping depending on your perspective of it, but allowing our state employees to fill positions after they have started collecting their CAPERS benefit. There is a provision that sunsets next year. Going in, we didn't know there's a penalty that is paid by the employees, which is pretty steep. It's about 23%. And we didn't know, is that more than, are we digging into their pockets? Are we falling short? We did a pretty thorough set of different scenarios. We can't estimate the overall cost, but we looked at some individual scenarios, and preliminarily it looks like we do not cover all of those costs, that there is a difference, that difference in what is paid then is made up from the rest of the CAPERS portfolio. So we'll be wading through what is that estimated cost to CAPERS, what are our staffing needs, how do we balance those, and in a perfect world we would be able to come up with some solution by the end of the session. I'm not sure if we can. I would like to, so that next year's legislature is not up against the deadline of what is happening. But we have some good data to work from, and I took almost all of the rest of the time that Tom has here, so thanks for the chance to be here. I'll stay.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Chamber and all of you for coming out this morning. It's a beautiful morning. I was able to come home this weekend and not have to shovel 12 inches of snow. It was wonderful. I could find my porch this morning. Boy, I tell you, after the first two, Senator Arky and my honored colleague, Representative Johnson, we sit on, Representative Johnson and I sit on two similar committees, so he's pretty well covered everything I was going to say. Veterans and Homeland Security is one of my favorite committees. Being is that, I feel that those who have served our country need to be honored and respected for the job well done. And this last week has been kind of an emotional week. We had a bill that was honoring Gold Star families. There's Gold Star wives, Gold Star moms, but one of our representatives had produced a bill that would honor families, and some of the conferees were those wives and moms and families, and very tearful, very emotional time. The outcome of that particular bill was that they thought that there were days already designated for Gold Star, and actually they were kind of arguing amongst themselves because they thought, some of this was pretty new as well, newly lost sons, husbands, fathers, it was a very emotional time. So to that amend, the representative who presented the bill came up with an idea that we would just have Gold Star Day at the Capitol. And what a beautiful place to have that, where they could bring a display, visit with people, maybe get with people that have suffered the same loss that they have. And, I thought it was very well received so far that maybe we just do something like that. I did present a bill, has not yet made it above the line or even underneath the calendar, because we're going through all these bills. We have turnaround on Friday, so everyone's scrambling, trying to get as many bills presented, conferees contacted, and testimonial given in order to pass some of these bills. The bill that I presented, and I didn't do it until I had first conversed with Superintendent Proffitt and Superintendent Hall to make sure that they would not consider this an actual mandate. I did not want it to be a mandate, but in Veterans and Homeland Security, we discussed that with what's occurring in our schools across the nation, perpetrators coming in, loss of life of our children, that we needed something, and it was brought to our attention that 25% of some of the Kansas schools still do not have policies and procedures on what to do in case of perpetration, of somebody coming into the school districts. I did not want this to sound like we were asking them to go and build safe rooms. In the bond issue passes here in April, they will have some tornado shelters, which might be an obvious thing. But the big premise behind this bill was that we work with first responders. And first responders, there was noted that in some cases, they knew, that they had first responders, but were not having a continuity of meeting, at least annually. So what this bill does is that it makes it that schools are to have policies and procedures in place in case of someone coming into the schools, and they are to meet annually with the first responders. One of the reasons being is, and I visited with Sheriff's Department and police officers, saying they have personnel turnover. So those that may have been there last year, new personnel will have an opportunity to meet with the school districts. And so far, it has not yet made the floor. I'm looking for it to perhaps be presented. I'll be able to present it this week, because I think it's really a good bill. Again, it's not a mandate, but yet it's just making these schools aware that we have to have policies and procedures available. In agriculture, yes, we've had 2 different presentation days on the great lesser prairie chicken. I've learned a lot about prairie chickens. It's been interesting, but I think some of the most important things, and really, we might smile about it, but it is an important issue. We want to save our wildlife, and I'm a conservationist. I want to make sure that the land is taken care of and our wildlife is taken care of. And it brings me to another point that we've covered in agriculture are the watersheds, the reservoirs that are backfilling with silt need to be dredged, which is going to be a large cost, but we need to preserve our waters. So the watershed was a big issue. We had conferees in agriculture just this last week regarding that. Of course, then we come to the big one, education. Our education committee has been meeting this past week. Common Core came up once again, and we ended up with 71 conferees. Needless to say, it was standing room only in the education room, and we had a large group of people that were out in the hallway. And when their turn came to present their thoughts, it was a challenge for them to be able to hear what was going on in the inside because of the noise. But at least they were there, and we listened patiently to both sides, and I applaud the people that took the time to get there, although with the number of people that we had show up, there was only a minute and a half that they were able to present their presentations, and there was obviously no time for us to be able to ask questions. I think if they had known they were going to have that many, perhaps we should have been able to have spread it over a couple of days and had those who lived close by perhaps do the second day and allow those who were traveling to make it the first day so that we'd be able to have more opportunity to visit with them and listen to their thoughts. Yesterday, after we had our session, we went to education at 1 o'clock, got out at 5. But we had conferees who were interested. They have brought back Senate Bill 22, which will be on the corporate tax credits for charter schools, the scholarship program for the schools, which there was a good debate over that because there are some issues that we need to address regarding that. But everyone, all the number of conferees, we had conferees again from both sides, and it was again another large group. So there are a lot of things going on in education. It's a very important committee. I'm not saying that the other committees are not, but it seems to be the one that gets a lot of attention. And then again, you know, there have been several issues. It was a lively day at the State House. We had fluoridation in one committee and we had Common Core in the other, so a lot of visitors. I would like to mention as well, as Representative Johnson did, that the State House is just absolutely marvelous. We've had kids from the schools. We had some gifted students come in from one of our school districts, and it was just totally awesome. They were just in awe. My biggest fear the first day going back to the State House is as we entered the garden level, we like to refer to it as that, the garden level, is that they had taken up the red tape that all of us used to find out how we found the elevator. I was very fortunate. The elevator that I used that comes right by my office was the very first elevator, so I didn't have to look very hard. It worked out very good. I would like to compliment Representative Johnson on his explanation of things that happen in pension and benefits, and he can take all the time he wants, because when he gets up there and they're talking about all this, I'll have to be real honest with you, some of us would really prefer that it be in English. With that, I just once again, I want to be sure and give Representative Arky some ample time, and I know that Senator Arky, I'm sorry, I want to give Representative Clay some ample time to give some testimony and visit with you. So thank you again so much for being here today. So.
In the House of Representatives, the Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee, and the Taxation Committee. Those are my three committees for the day. Our economy here in Kansas is on the right track. We have created 49,400 new private sector jobs since January of 2011. We have 4.9% unemployment here in the state of Kansas. We're among the top 10 states in the nation for the creation of new jobs. We're keeping more young Kansans in Kansas, which means that our policies of educate and export are coming to an end. We have had the largest reduction in government than any state in the nation, and our tax plan is working. Our state revenues are $21.1 million ahead of projections. We're at 15,496 new business filings in 2013, 10,100 new jobs in 2013, and a 6.9% increase in exports out of the state of Kansas. When it comes to taxation, I've had the opportunity to visit with our Register of Deeds yesterday and learn a little bit more about what's happening when it comes to issues that are extremely local and affect us here in Saline County. Issues like the mortgage registration fee and some of those issues that are very important to us, and how that impacts taxes and spending here at the county level. And I've been very tough, admittedly, on some of our local units of government, and I do want to say that the folks who are representing us here in Salina and Saline County are doing an excellent job. They deserve our thanks for making some very tough decisions. And it's important that we have a level of respect for those people who are in those positions and are making those very difficult decisions here at the local level. Having had the opportunity to visit with Rebecca and others on some of these issues, it's been very enlightening on how much effort it really takes to accomplish some of the jobs that are being done at that level. So I do appreciate that, and I appreciate Rebecca for offering the opportunity to come in and really see what's going on in some of those local levels of government. As far as issues that we're addressing in the House of Representatives, we've passed through the House a new corrections budget. The 2015 budget was vetoed by the governor. It didn't address all of the issues that we had with juvenile justice. And the current one that we just passed still has some of those issues that will be corrected before it finally is delivered by the House to the by the House and Senate to the governor's desk. And that again affects us right here locally here in Saline County. It's important that we get that fixed and get it to the governor's desk so that we don't have any lapses in programs and the things that are important to us right here in Saline County. The House also passed a raise for court services officers. Again, that affects our court system. Those folks were promised a raise many years ago, and the House has finally delivered on that promise that was made by some other folks. Out of the House, we did pass association health plans. That will allow about 350,000 Kansans the opportunity at more affordable health insurance. A lot of the folks who are being talked about who are in that 29-hour range, who are working at restaurants and those types of establishments, will suddenly, after we get this thing passed, have several more choices when it comes to healthcare options through private employers. That plan allows employers to pool into self-funded plans and does not limit us to the very few insurance companies that are participating here in the state of Kansas. A 67-page sleeping pill was passed through the House, LLC modernization. That was a read. I do promise one thing: if I'm voting yes on a bill, I read the whole thing. If I'm voting no, I generally stop at the part that I don't like. But that one I read and I liked it, and wow, that was something. It keeps Kansas competitive with Delaware business laws, essentially, and it did a lot of updating that was sorely needed for businesses to find the state of Kansas more attractive as a place to open up. So hopefully that will address some of the issues that we had with being a little more competitive with the Delaware filings, and we are less expensive than Delaware, so it ends up being advantageous to choose Kansas as a place to do business and to start a business. As far as legislation coming up in the House, all-day kindergarten was put back into the governor's budget. I think that's a very important issue that definitely affects us right here in Salina. We don't currently have all-day kindergarten offered. By budgeting for that through the state, we'll be able to offer that. And then, of course, we have the bond issue that I'll leave to the wisdom of the people of Salina to choose whether they're going to spend those dollars or not. But I do believe that all-day kindergarten is a worthwhile investment. And I do hope that ends up being a part of our plan going forward. We've had several unemployment tax reforms running through Commerce Committee that will make it so that some of these companies that are putting in large sums of money into the UI plans, they're getting to the point where it would take 100 years of the experience rating that they're receiving to pay that down. So it's getting a little silly, the amount of money that's being dumped in there by some of these companies. So we'll try to straighten some of that out so that we're being a little more fair in that respect. We have some machinery and equipment property tax exemptions that will be straightened up. There's some regulations on that we'll probably codify into law so that we're being more consistent throughout the state. We have 105 counties, and when you have two of them next to each other treating a property that's essentially identical extremely differently, it's unconstitutional, but the Constitution doesn't give us guidance as far as which one's right. So we need to figure out which one's right. We have essentially a company that's being charged $800,000 in property tax and one next door in a neighboring county that's being charged $8 million. And we can't have that, so we will likely have something to address that being sent out of the House soon enough for that specific issue, but then statewide we'll probably come up with a better plan that allows for some more strict guidance when it comes to what is and isn't personal and real property. The Secretary of State's office has requested some things to streamline business filing processes, so we'll probably kick that out of Commerce Committee and work on making that process a little more efficient, as was discussed for probably the past 5 years. And then we're also looking in Tax Committee at an improvement of the tax appeals process. Most people give up on that thing. It's very expensive to go through the tax appeals process at the state level. So we're going to try to make it so that it's a little more fair and a little less costly for folks who are just trying to get a fair appraisal on the property. And with that, I'll kind of close up here. And again, thanks a lot for being out here today. Look forward to your questions, and hopefully you'll address them first to Senator Arkey, since he needs to.
Thank you. We'll start our question and answer session. On your,
the three G's issues, God, and guns against gays, and lost revenue for local schools and local government. How did you vote on each of those issues? You sort of addressed that. In your mind, how frivolous were they? Will any of the three G's keep coming out? And did any of you backpedal almost immediately and readily on any of the first votes that you took on any of the above three G's? Thanks. God, guns, and gays.
Is this for Senator Arky?
I-
This is a House issue.
For all of you.
This is a House issue. It's where it came up. And I'm not sure I've got the question. There's one question.
What question?
Is
Which one do you
gays-
wanted to
Is
address?
gays the question? Is that what
Yeah,
you got?
guns and gays, how they're associated, how did you vote? Is it still viable? Are there
Well, I'm
issues
a little
still-
lost, Gary, so I'll start talking. That's a great plan. I don't know of any gun bills that have come up yet. Perhaps I missed one, so maybe there's one that came through there. Now, the gods and gays thing, if we, to use bad terms, were together in the bill of the Religious Freedom Bill. And that one was a big issue in the House. I happened to vote no on that bill. It was definitely portrayed one way, as Representative Clay said, reading the whole bill as a challenge. I have not been, I didn't read the whole LLC bill. I did vote for that one. I did not read all of this bill. I got far enough to be confused, and it is very possible to confuse me on judicial bills. And when the attorneys talk, they don't add any exciting figures or statistics in it to hold your interest. And anyway, this one was challenging to figure out exactly. On the surface, I think everyone would vote to protect religious freedom. That's a good concept. I think we're built on that. As you start to interpret that, and if you wish to protect a specific freedom, I think that's even fine. However, once you start down the road of protecting one specific thing, it starts then to the exclusion of others. And how do I interpret and know that that truly protects all rights, all interests? There were a variety of reasons that you could use to vote against the bill. Certainly, you could use wanting to be more friendly to gay rights would be a reason to oppose that bill. Having just questions about church and state, just a question, may cause you to not go for the bill. I don't know that it necessarily crossed that boundary. But then you get into issues which were not discussed on the floor and not portrayed by the writer or carrier of the bill. That is, now I'm an employer, and this relates to the possibility of refusing service to someone. How do I know that your views may keep you in a position to execute the job that I hired you to do? At that point, it got very muddy, and I had a question of that in my mind. It was not as well defined as it certainly was more clearly afterwards when the Chamber and other organizations came out after the bill came out with additional points. But there were a lot of questions in my mind. It made it know to be the right vote going in. So I probably talked too long on that. I think that was most of what you're wanting me to get through.
It was, thanks. And the rest of you, please.
I agree with Representative Johnson. This is one of the hardest bills, I think, that has come across the desk of the legislature in a very long time. When the bill was presented in calendar, they just hit the highlights, and it was, again, more towards the religious freedoms or beliefs of perhaps the proprietor of a business. And I read the entire bill, and as I sat there, I thought this is becoming more and more and more discriminating against those individuals who may very well live within our community. I know I have a neighbor not too far from me that I thought of him immediately, and I thought this particular bill may have started out as one idea, but it just escalated into more and more where I felt it was really very discriminatory. And to me, it was like opening up a door to history. We've come through in my lifetime, discrimination against those of color, discrimination against those of certain religions, discrimination against someone from a different country. And these are neighbors. And the concept to me, in looking at this particular bill, was, you know, before we started this meeting today, we all stood up and pledged the flag. And I am so proud to be a citizen of the United States of America and the freedoms that we have, but freedom was, do you love your neighbor? But yes, I love my neighbor only if he's white, not that if he's of color, not if he's of any, in this particular case, what his lifestyle is. Do I agree with their lifestyle? Would not be for me or my family, but it's their decision, not my decision. And I just saw discrimination written all over this. It was an easy vote for me. I had to really think about it at first, but then after I got into the text of the bill, it was an easy vote for me that in our body, this bill was not for us to make a decision on someone's beliefs and their lifestyle. And it really did, if you look at it, when you're talking about businesses, this would really mean, I started painting a picture here, that this would mean that if I was an employer and I had religious beliefs that I did not want to bake the cake for this particular couple, I would have to know whether or not I had an employee that would not feel uncomfortable doing that. And then I would have to ask him that question. And to me, that's getting into his personal life. And that's discriminating against my employee because I have to ask him the question, well, would you be willing to do this? And it was like the domino effect to me. You start one, you start something else, and then pretty soon here comes something else. So that is how I evaluated the situation when I was reading that bill. And I thought at this particular time, or at any time, it would not be an appropriate bill for us to be discussing, and as it turned out, it wasn't. So that's how I felt about it.
Gary?
I'm gonna
only
take a
one
minute here,
question.
because I've got to go.
Yeah.
I, like Dennis, have 100 young men and women waiting for me. So my wife was expecting me about 12 minutes ago. So thank you very much for coming, and AT&T, thank you very much. Thank
Gary,
you.
let's have another question. If we have time, you can come back to your follow-up question.
Let's let the,
No, let's go to another question.
Mary Ann Trickle, and this question is for each of you. What are your feelings about the future of college and career-ready standards, and where do you stand on that issue?
Future of college and career-ready standards. I support the standards continuing. I believe that making the decision of those standards is best and is most appropriately directed by the school boards that implement them. I think they know what is most needed, and that is where I would look for the advice. As long as I hear consistently from those school leaders that works, that's the direction that I would go. I have heard from, as some of the conferees came into the building, some homeschool families that were people that I went to college with and others. A question that they asked me that I don't know how to address is how would the standards affect what they do in their curriculum? I don't know the answer to that. I'd like to learn what that is and help them through whatever that process is as well. I don't know that it changes it at all, but that's the only question that has come to my mind relating the standards and how we may wish to go with that. I'm not certain where that goes. Earlier in the session, I didn't think that there was necessarily a lot of traction to change that. The committee, the House had both rejected proposals to change or eliminate that standard. Certainly, there's been a longer time to discuss it. We have not yet had a vote. My guess is that the votes will still be similar to what they were last year, and we still have a ways to go. Even if it gets through a committee and then through the House, getting through the Senate, I don't think we're going for a long session this year. And this came up as we were drawing out into even longer days in the session last year. I think there's a chance we can time out on the issue as well. So for what it's worth, there's a few thoughts that I have. I may be one of the lesser educated on the issue here.
Thank you for your question. Of course, this is a big element in the Education Committee, as you may well guess, with the 71 conferees. I think it was about even, proponents and opponents. But one of the questions that kept coming up was data collecting. I think that's the biggest concern. I think through the legislation, I think some of the fears about Common Core have subsided somewhat, but the big one that keeps rising is data collection. So I asked Dale Dennis, Deputy Commissioner of Education for the state, to give me, because during that course of conferees, he was asked a question about the data collection, and he gave some really good information, and I asked him if he would summarize what some of those things were and what they actually use the data for. It says, all data is confidential and covered by the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. Statistically, what they need to know is number of students enrolled, number of students in approved bilingual education programs, number of students on free lunch, which determines our at-risk aid, number of students in approved career and technical education programs, number of students being transported over 2.5 miles, so that would be a transportation question, number of students that qualify to attend kindergarten, average daily attendance, number of students eligible for special education services, state assessment results helpful to teachers in determining the students' needs, number of students concurrently enrolled in high school and post-secondary institutions, number of students enrolled in virtual programs. The majority of this information is collected for the computation and distribution of state and federal aid, federal reporting, and available to school districts for program improvement. For example, if there is an area on the state assessments that identifies an area where students are not doing well, feedback from the data would be helpful in identifying problems and assist the school district to improve their curriculum. And on the fact sheet, just a couple of things that they ask. They ask for the name, birth date, race, and gender, just so that they know the demographics of the population of the students that attend our schools. And it's used by transportation, enrollment and attendance, program participation, course outcomes, special education, discipline, state assessments, and career technical education. All of these things are for the betterment of our kids to make them ready for college or tech school or wherever they decide, but it's something there for their students. And with all of the testimony, I still am of the same mindset that I am in favor of Common Core, and I will be voting to not defund if the Common Core bill ever makes it to the floor.
I don't serve on the education committee, so I haven't had the in-depth study that Diana has, but I don't have an issue with the college and career ready standards as I understand them now. But I'll leave that to the wisdom of the education committee to decide whether that comes out of it or not. But I would like to say that I'm really excited about all the options that we have for those who are career focused and focused right here in Salina. We have Salina Tech, we have Kansas Wesleyan University, K-State Salina. We even have a 4-year medical school right here in Salina. And all the work that the chamber does and the folks around here who give us the opportunity at bringing some good jobs right here to Saline County, that's important. And it gives us a better chance of keeping those graduates right here in Salina so that we can grow and create a tax base that can support all the services that we offer our people here in Salina and Saline County. So with that, I would just say that at this point, I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other on them, and I would just defer to the wisdom of the education committee to decide whether that needs to go or not.
Good morning, my name is Julie McKenna. I have a question about House Bill 2704. It is in the insurance committee. It's a insurance bill that affects children with autism in Kansas. And I want to know whether or not you're in favor of a bill that would limit insurance coverage to a child with autism to the age of 11, that would limit coverage for applied behavior analysis, which is an area of helping children with autism to less than 9 years of age. A bill that would limit ABA coverage to 520 hours or 10 hours per week when the comprehensive ABA is 30 to 40 hours weekly. Whether or not you favor a bill that uses outdated DSM terms for children with autism, and whether or not you support a bill that guts the coverage which now is in existence for state employees who just recently were successful in getting insurance coverage for children with autism. More so because this affects children and families in Kansas, and 1 in 55 children are diagnosed with autism. So I would like to know if you are in favor or opposed of a bill that is so detrimental to families in Kansas.
Thank you for the question, Julie.
Do you want it to all three?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
There are two autism bills, I believe,
There
that have
are.
been entered, and I think that this may just be a strategic issue where one group decided to put in the most extreme bill on their side and the other on the other side, and that there will be negotiation to come to an agreement on that. So I'm hesitant to take a really firm stand on anything until the committee has a real chance to decide what that middle ground is. But no, I don't think I agree with 2704 as it stands. Just in a cursory reading and my understanding of it, I would not vote for that bill specifically.
It's
But
pretty
I
drastic.
might vote for something that's the compromise in between, or maybe even more leaning towards the other bill.
The one that I believe Representative Rubin.
Yes, correct. But I think that is the intent, is for the committee to kind of look through this and figure out what that middle ground is on it. But I don't serve on insurance, so I don't have the gory details, but I have inquired on this specifically a couple of times because it's something that I think is important. And I think overall, what you'll see is a cost savings to the state by catching these things early and addressing them, and giving these kids a real chance. So I think that's the important outcome that we'll be striving for.
So the bill.
Julie, just one question.
If it looks more like the other one, I'd probably be more.
This would be a bill you'd stop reading.
I'd probably stop reading on page 2, yes.
Thank you, sir.
I really don't think that I could add much more to that. Again, I don't sit on the insurance committee either, and I haven't really had an opportunity to really evaluate it. But I think most people in the audience here know how I feel about kids, and anything that would be detrimental to them would be an absolute no for me. So, and hopefully that there will be a good bill come that we can vote on and make sure that these kids are have access.
And
Oh, sorry.
I'll say the same. I appreciate JR was able to look up and find the contents of that and other bills that are there. So on this bill, it would be a no, and a compromise really is the key to try and find that. I think early in the session, they had discussed that there was something in the works that was there, and then I don't know what exactly happened that caused people to break from that and wound up with two very different bills at this point in time. So if we don't come to a compromise, I wouldn't give anything a great chance of passing just watching the issue in past years in the session. But if we can come up with something that probably won't be everything that you want, because there probably will be some limits in a compromise. I have not seen Ruben's bill to know if that addresses all of those or not, but would at least get another step from where we are currently. And that's what I would look for to try to pass.
All right, thank you.
As a reminder, after your questions, please be seated.
Okay, good morning. Randy Duncan, County Commissioner, County. My bill, not my bill, but a bill I have a question on would be the mortgage registration fees, which would affect all of us here in Summit County. I know Representative Clays has talked to all of the county commissioners and our registered deeds about it, Rebecca Seaman. But I guess your opinions on the mortgage registration fees, whether you're for or against the bill, which would eliminate the fees, it would affect Saline County to the tune of almost $700,000. It's in the Senate committee this week. I know Senator Arky's gone, but we don't know. It looks like it may go through the Senate committee this week with an amendment. Just your opinion, whether you're for the bill or against the bill, which would eliminate the mortgage registration fee. Thank you very much.
I'd be happy to answer that. I sit on the tax committee that will probably get that bill. As it stands now, I would probably be against that particular legislation. It's pretty drastic as far as just pulling the rug out from under a revenue source immediately. Even the phase out seems pretty drastic. So I would look for some sort of compromise that lowers that and perhaps increases the per page fees so that there's a little more balance in that and some more revenues coming from those who aren't necessarily getting the mortgages, but again, not necessarily removing the entirety of the fee on the other side. So I'm sure that there's probably a middle ground there that can be struck that both serves those who are getting mortgages, which tends to be people who can't afford to pay cash for a house. So that's probably important not to put the entirety of the burden on them for funding it, but then also not necessarily taking it completely away.
As soon as I was made aware of this particular bill, I visited with Rebecca and what kind of impact it would have on our community. And when I had the figure of over $700,000, that this is not good. Even though I am a realtor and belong to the Kansas Association of Realtors, we don't always agree on what they want. And I just can't see the reasoning behind this. I know they're looking for a compromise, and increasing recording documentation instead of the registration fee, which would bring back some of the money that would be lost to the counties. But at this particular point, I still have not been convinced that I should vote yes on this bill.
And I have not supported this bill or the concept of taking away. Initially, I wasn't particularly fond of the state necessarily telling the county what to do, and then the additional education that I've gotten since then, thanks to emails, and the actual cost that it takes to run that, keep records, etc., it's pretty meaningful as well. The revenue stream does fluctuate as well, which makes it harder to necessarily nail down, but still, all in, that one was a pretty clear issue for me.
I'm Greg Anderson. I'd like to see the state law changed so that biological fathers have rights to see their kids, not even with DNA proof. You look at the ironclad.
Thank you, and I know that that's an issue that has been brought to the attention, and in my office, and there's somebody that has been working on that. It didn't fall right down any of the committee lines, and I need to ask. I am very lucky this year to have a talented intern in my office who grew up here in our community, Kristen Conley. And I know that she had done a little bit of additional research on that, and I will follow up on that to see where it is. So thank you for the comment.
Just a question on campaign finance. And it's disappointing that Senator Archie wasn't able to stick around to answer questions from his constituents. But since Governor Brownback has come back to Kansas, we've seen an increased tendency of outside groups to fund our elections. And of course, the role of the Koch brothers has gotten a lot of publicity. But that leads to distortions, such as we had one of you at the table in 2014 elected without a single individual in your district being listed on your campaign donor report. And my question is that kind of thing good for our democracy? And on the chance that any of you have answered no, what could be done about that?
Campaign finance. I'm going to guess that's directed to me because I'm not sure if I had an individual listed on my campaign finance report in the last election. So I'm probably the offender. I'm not sure. But I also didn't happen to spend very much on my campaign since I was lucky to not have an opponent. I have appreciated the laws that we have in Kansas that limit the amount that can be contributed from an individual. I haven't bumped my head into the other issues, so the question raises a good point, because I can absolutely see where money makes a difference. And I like having limits on what can be there from my perspective, so that you don't have to spend a great amount of money on those campaigns. I think, I need to look mine up, I think that I spent something approaching $13,000 the first time, and I need to look at what I spent the last time. But when I look across the border to Missouri and look at how much is spent in a state level campaign on average, it is a lot. And I appreciate the laws that we have that at least keep those expenditures lower than what I see in some of the outside ones. Influence of outside groups. That is a challenge both in terms of dollars and message. In addition to the dollars, it is frustrating to see the parts of information that are shared, the incredible amount of spin that comes out in election. Definitely a part of the process that I'm not proud of and don't want to have to participate in. So the reforms that are in the Senate, and there's that bill that is coming up, I know that they make some changes. I don't know how far it'll go. I think it proposed increasing the amount that could be contributed to a Senate campaign, not making that greater than what's in a House campaign. It may be necessary to increase individual limits, and perhaps that would get closer to balance the concern of outside groups. But while I know there are problems with the system, as I compare it to others, I appreciate having the limits we have.
I would just mirror what Representative Johnson says. I know when you're out there campaigning, unfortunately, money does help because of just getting the name out, letting people know where you stand on certain things. The big postcard influx that we had in the last election, that really hurts a lot of good qualified candidates, and a lot of things come out that perhaps might be some untruths or some exaggerated ideas, and we're all hoping that we don't see that this time. But I really feel that in my efforts, what I tried to do was to reach as many people as I could, knocked on as many doors as I could, because and listen to what they had to say. But unfortunately, money always seems to be the contributing factor in some races to being elected. But I really feel that the way that our campaign finance and the ethics and the limits of how much individuals can contribute really has some good basis, and that's really what I feel about it.
I don't have a lot to add to that. I largely financed my own campaign, and I think that it's difficult to ask folks for money when times are tough. I don't agree necessarily with increasing the limits. I know that that's been floated out there, maybe moving it up to $750 for a house raise from the current $500, or $1,000 for a couple who share a checking account. I suppose that can happen too, but I just don't see the need for that. I guess dollars can play a role. Generally, in my experience, people tend to ask you where you stand on an issue and then contribute afterwards. But maybe that can be misconstrued another way. But I suppose it has an effect on people who don't have as much of a foundation for a campaign and need those dollars to really get a message out. One thing I really have a problem with, more so than necessarily negative ads or things like that, is when an outside group who's perceived as friendly to you ends up sending out a message that kind of steps on the message that you're trying to send. And I know that happened to me in the last campaign, and it was really annoying. I know that the chamber and their Obamacare stuff was really interesting, but that wasn't really a piece of my campaign. So having that mail go out was, and they can't consult with you, so I get that. You can't necessarily tell them to cut it out, but those things happen, and I guess that's probably just another way to look at it. Is friendlies can be annoying too.
And I hate to weigh in again, but I thought of it, and JR had said it. I hate asking people for money, and some of you have been kind enough to set up fundraisers for me, but I just don't like to ask that, so you'll probably continue to see my numbers be low on that. Lobby groups offer, and I have accepted money from those lobby groups that are in Topeka for the campaign.
I'm Sister Christina Meyer. I just want to ask all three of you, what is your opinion on repealing the death penalty in the state of Kansas?
Oh boy. The Viking calendar had the world ending today, so I was hoping to skip without having to answer anything. Mercifully. I support the death penalty when it comes to the way we apply it in the state of Kansas. I think if ours was more Texas-like, I would probably have a different opinion. But currently we have 9 people on death row, and they're all there very deservedly so. I think it's a great tool for prosecutors to use to maneuver people into the hard 50. And one of those people who had evidence provided against him, who is on death row, his partner in crime, is serving a hard 50 because that death penalty was taken off the table to incentivize him confessing. So I think it's an important tool. I think it needs to be used very sparingly, and I think that we've done that in Kansas. So I would be in support of keeping our death penalty statute the way it is when it comes to the way we apply it specifically in Kansas, and not excessively as it might seem in other states.
This one, I know in my heart what I feel. There's always that question to me that there's been several occasions where they have found that the wrong person was incarcerated. And what do you say to the family of that person if we've already executed them? Do I feel that they deservedly need to be kept in prison for something that they've done? But so many people are talking about the sanctity of life, but at the same time, here we are taking life, I guess. I had a gentleman come to visit me in my office, and he had a family member murdered. And yes, it was a devastating blow to that family, but he sat there in tears and saying to me You know, my family was devastated by the loss of our loved one, but our loved one would not have wanted somebody to lose a life because that's the way that person felt. And that's going to be a really tough decision and a tough if that ever comes to the floor. And I have several colleagues that we've talked about it one day, and they felt about that same way I did. But again, it's my constituents who I serve, and they will be the ultimate answer to the question. But I just wanted you to feel that that would be a real tough one for me. And I think the passing of the hard 50, these people are going to die in prison. But if that one small, slight chance would ever come up that somebody else had actually done that, whatever crime it was, that we had put to death an innocent person.
This one is a tough question, and at this point, I believe that I would vote for the repeal. That is a difference in the position of when I took the office, and I'm still weighing through, and I don't know if we will get to vote on it this session or not. This is certainly a weighty matter. That is there any benefit of deterrent? Is there a crime so heinous that there truly is no other remedy? I believe that the counterweight to that we haven't used the death penalty since I believe 1965, that life in prison, the hard 50, the difference in the deterrent from crime, I don't know that it is huge. There is a possibility of wrongful conviction. Certainly that it is something of which to be aware. That leads to the lengthy process which makes the appeals, etc., at least from the numbers I've seen, actually more expensive to go that route than life in prison. As I attempt to best balance that and talk to thinking and caring people, I believe that I come out on the side of the repeal. But it's one where I haven't been in the throes of that debate to see if there's anything that could weigh the other way, but that would be my stand on the issue.
This will be the last question before the legislators' closing remarks.
My name is Mary Mertz. I'm from Salina. I'm interested in how all three of you are thinking about the alternative energy bills, the renewable portfolio standards, and the net metering issues.
Thanks for the question. I've heard both of these going through. I'm not as aware of the net metering issue. The renewable portfolio standards, I believe they will continue to hold, and I will vote in favor of continuing to hold the renewable portfolio standards. The overall mix that we have in energy, all sources are important. Most of our utilities have already complied with those standards. We have built out the production to be in compliance. We're building excess production and are benefiting from the standard in other states to be able to export power. That definitely brings some benefit to our state, and I think staying consistent with policy, even if there are elements of which I might want to argue as people make investment in our state in infrastructure, et cetera, I don't think you want to change those rules lightly. So with all of those things together, I would stick with that. Now, if you roll the whole clock back and say exactly what rate, how would we develop this going forward, I think then the doors could be open to have more discussion about changing that. But given that we're in compliance and to be consistent in supporting the industries, I think that we leave those standards where they are. If we ran into a major issue with being able to comply, then I think you bring up more of the points to say, okay, how do we do that? And that could happen in other states where wind and other things are not as accessible. It is costly to build transmission lines across several states to get wind power from one location to another, and I can see it bumping it into some issues other places. I think we are fortunate to have a lot of resource options here in Kansas, and that can work for us. I may listen to the other net metering comments to make sure that I'm on target with that. I have what I think is the case, but I'm not sure that I'm right. So.
Really, I think Representative Johnson pretty well explains the feel at this particular time at the State House. It's I don't sit on those committees, so I don't know all of the aspects of it. But I feel that our state's in compliance. Things seem to be working at this particular time. And what my thoughts are is I want to really weigh in on it. And until I have more information in front of me, like I said, I read the bills. I want the complexities. I want to know for sure exactly everything that both consequences and benefits. But at this point, I feel that I would certainly go along with what's been introduced to me thus far. And as I go along and gather additional information, you have to. When we're here, sitting here in front of you in this arena, you have to remember that we sit on 3 different committees, and everybody seems to have a different committee, other than Representative Johnson and I sit on 2 together. I don't know how that happened, but very fortunate. But we don't know all the aspects of it. And when the bills come before us on the floor, that's the time that we read the bill brief and know more about it to give more of an educated answer. So at that point, that's kind of where I stand at the moment.
The RPS issue was sent back to committee last session, I believe, for further study. I didn't really support that then. I don't know that I necessarily support it now, but I'd like to look at it before it comes to the floor, if it does. At any point in time. As far as net metering goes, from what I understand of the bill, and this is not something I've studied, so it's just a cursory understanding of the bill, but it does, it reduces the price that's paid back to the customer, essentially, when the customer sells that energy back to the grid. So you would be charged a higher price for your energy, and then you would receive a lower price for everything that gets sent back to the grid. And the challenges there, of course, are that somebody built the grid, so they're essentially saying, well, you're sticking electricity onto our grid, and you've got to pay for that because we built all those lines that you're using. And then you have the issue of the quality of the electricity that's being shot back onto the grid, and whether that's really something that the electric companies even want. So there are some issues there that probably need to be resolved. I can understand from the position of the person who's actually putting that electricity back on the grid. It'd be great to have a one-for-one where you essentially were being able to put your electricity back on the grid and reduce your overall energy costs. But at the same time, looking at it from the other perspective, there are some issues there with the fact that they are, building power lines that you're essentially using to push that electricity back on. So again, as with all things that come rolling through House and Senate, there's probably a middle ground there that needs to be reached on that net metering issue. But as far as RPS, I don't see a need to go back on what established policy is.
And just since I cheated off JR, to have him look up the bill and tell me a little bit of what was in the net metering bill. To start with, for me, it would seem like a reasonable position is that I would expect to pay the retail price for power and expect to get the wholesale price, what they pay for power other places, as it goes into the grid. I wouldn't expect it to be the same number. I don't know that anyone does or has. I don't know what other issues come up past that. It amazes me as I watch, because I don't know all of the things that go in, but how you keep the grid powered with variable demands, variable supplies, and at some point I'm sure that could be a challenge. I wouldn't think our production in various places would have to increase beyond what they are currently. But if all of us, for example, happen to be in such an arrangement, it could be more of a challenge. And so I don't know that the solution that fits today might always fit, but the starting point that I would be at would be the wholesale and retail prices, and then try to work from there to see what really works for everybody in the system. So that's probably the oversimplification, since I still haven't read the bill, but are just the thoughts that I have in the top of my head. So thank you.
Okay, let's start with closing comments. I'm not sure which one of you may want to.
You want to start with closing comments this time? We'll go the other way.
Well, thanks again for coming out today. I really appreciate the largeness of the crowd here today, and happy to stick around for a little bit afterwards to answer more questions of folks that you get a chance to ask them earlier. Again, a big thanks to the Chamber, to AT&T for hosting this, and look forward to the next one, March 22nd. Yeah,
I think that's
March
right.
22nd. All right, thanks again.
Thank you so much, the Chamber and the AT&T, and I have to get one of these. Let me tell you, he has all the answers right at his fingertips. I really appreciated the questions that you asked today, and hope that when you leave here today, you have some of your answers and how we stand on different issues. And please keep these questions coming to us. Keep in communication. I would really encourage you to email us. I get a lot of emails and I answer them. And, you know, that's how we have contact to home. And these forums are very, very informational. And I wish that this room was double packed, because this is how our constituents and the people that we serve are able to have some of their questions answered. So I really do encourage you to keep in communication with us with any issue. Let us know if you think we're doing good, and let us know if you think, why did you do that? Because we want to know. That's how we learn. That's how we look at things, and we'll continue to do just the best that we can. Thank you so much for your time. And it's such a pleasure to be here today. And thank you once again to AT&T and to the Chamber.
Thanks, the biggest word. Great to be with you. Thanks for your communication today. Thanks for your communication throughout the session as issues bump into us and helping us figure out bills to carry, how to support, what to watch out for. There are some crazy things that come up. Most of them get stopped. There are sometimes we've got, as I've talked about the aqueduct, it's not entirely bad to bring up some ideas that push the envelope, but keeping to shape that vision together is really key. And as I look around the room, I see so many of you that keep our communities running in sharing information, in working with the City Commission, working with the County Commission, working with the State Board of Education, school board superintendents, school board members, K-State, so many, and all that you do on a daily basis, and the service that you give. So thank you for all of that and helping us know how do we try to work best together on those issues for those entities, for our children with specific needs, and how we care for them as a community and how we build together. So I look forward to continuing to create that vision with you, and thanks to AT&T and the Chamber for giving us the forum.